Good afternoon, all. A heartfelt welcome to all esteemed participants and distinguished guests as we convey for a session Climate Resilience of Future Grid. Today's discussion will navigate through crucial point addressing the challenges posed by changing weather pattern and the imperative needs for climate resilience in our evolving energy landscape. Leading this session with wisdom and experience in the esteemed UN Behera ji, former chairman of OERC, serving as the session chair. Welcome, sir. Guiding our discourse with expertise is Mr. Ravi Seethapathy, advisor at ISGF, as our esteemed moderator. Welcome, sir. Enriching our understanding further, we are honored to welcome our theme presenter, Mr. Amit Tripathi, advisor power sector at CDRI, who will serve valuable insights into climate resilient power infrastructure. Welcome, sir. Additionally, a warm welcome extended to our esteemed session speakers, Mr. Daniel, Vice President, IT PTPLN Indonesia. Welcome, sir. Mr. R. Mehta, former mentor and advisor, Reliance Infrastructure. Welcome, sir. Miss Vandana Singhal, Chief Engineer CEA. She will join with in few minutes. Chintamani, Mr. Chintamani, Chief Technology TPCODL. Welcome, sir. Mr. Suvendra Kumar Senapati, Head Sales and Commercial Services L&T. Welcome, sir. Mr. Vivek Pandey, Senior GM, Grid India. Welcome, sir. Now, I handed over to Mr. Ravi Seethapathy, sir, to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, I have to thank Reggie and I have to thank our panelists who have steadfastly sort of supported this initiative to keep this dialogue alive. This is the third time we are doing it, twice at ISUW and once at Kochi, and we will probably repeat it again at Lucknow. The reason for this being is that a so-called collective momentum with respect to what is a climate change mitigation in practical engineering terms to the utility has still not been described. Neither in the standards, not in anything. And all we have is sort of 1.5 degree, 2 degree, those kinds of scientific terminology. So I must thank Reggie again. He's not here, but I thank him again on record. So as a moderator, I only have 2 slides, which is very good. This particular discussion points, this is outlined in your book. It talks of, the equipment specs and standards for changing weather patterns, what should be the infrastructure redesign for flood control, cyclone-resistant poles, or should we go underground? Those kinds of big matter discussions have to take place. It may not apply uniformly everywhere, but at least there should be a rationale as to why we are going A or we are going B. And that is one. But more important within the context of this discussion, and I've outlined to the panel if they would like to talk on it, but they may choose to talk on other interesting subjects. So that is also there. The question is that with ambient temperature rising and with high RE, the net load volatility behind the meter is actually twice as high as it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So the question is, with thermal limits approaching because of higher ambience, are we stressing our system more than what we were doing 20 years ago? Why? Because these systems are all procured to older standards, not to today's standards. The second is hurricane versus, where should we go overhead with hurricane-proof poles? What will they look like? Or should we go underground? I think that is a big discussion in the United States right now, south, southeast, and the west, so to speak. And then the third is what will our future substations look like? Because we already built it, bulk of them. So how do we flood-proof it? Do we therefore rise? What should we do? What should be the key elements here? And the last, which is I think very important, is why have the standards not been in tandem with all our discussions. In fact, every time we examine, we don't see a standards person sort of very actively involved in these discussions. So why are standards never present when these discussions take place? Or why haven't they led from the front, knowing fully well a 35-degree ambient today stands at 48, 49 in Delhi. So it's a big national, international issue, in fact, I would say. So with this, my job is done. I have to only moderate on time. So the theme speaker gets 15 minutes. All others get 10 minutes. And we'll have a Q&A at the end. And I have the pleasure of introducing our chair. Our chair will come and speak as well. Thank you.
All the panelists on the dais, Mr. Ravi Seethapathy, Mr. Amit Tripathi, Mr. Daniel from Indonesia, Mr. Mehta, former advisor Reliance Infrastructure, Mrs. Singhal is coming from CEA, Mr. Chintamani Chitnis, Chief Technology from TPCODL, Tata Power Central Odisha Distribution Limited, Mr. Suvendra Senapati, Head of Sales and Commercial Services from L&T, and Mr. Vivek Pandey, Senior GM of Grid India. Mr. Seethapathy has already broadly introduced the topic to you. It's a very important area. Climate proofing or climate resilience of grid infrastructure is a very important area, because you all know what kind of devastation various weather events can cause. We have seen major cyclones in the eastern coast of India. Odisha, particularly Andhra Pradesh, have faced many such cyclones, huge floods in different parts of the country, and different weather events have damaged the grid infrastructure very badly over the last so many years. In fact, the number of such erratic events increasing every year. They say in the last 20 years there has been some 17 or 18 major events in India in the last 20 years. This is maybe it is because of the climate change. Climate change is like global warming and climate change was an issue that was being earlier debated whether climate change is real or not. But now it's proved that it is real. It has happened. It is happening, and it has happened, and it is going to stay with us unless we do something about mitigating it. Anyway, mitigation is a different area, it's a parallel area. What we are talking about today is adaptation. Adaptation to various major weather events. The resilience, basically we have to create the resilience so that we adapt to that kind of a situation happening. And as Mr. Seethapathy said, a lot is to be done on the infrastructure side, how to do it, what to do it, and who will do it. Who will do it in the sense, who will meet the cost. That is also a major area. It is not very simple, it is expensive. So meeting the cost is also a very important thing. And again, we have to also come how to, revive. When an event has occurred, how to revive. That is another restoration, what we call it, restoration and revival. That is also another major area. With this, I welcome all the panelists, all the participants to this session. I am sure this will be a very interesting session for all of us, and we will have good takeaways from this session. Earlier also, ISGF has organized a couple of sessions on this. But anyway, things are evolving. Mr. Seethapathy was lamenting why we have discussed it so many times, why things are not happening. Things happen. Things happen maybe slowly, but it happens for sure. So let us be hopeful about it, and I am sure this session will provide a lot of inputs for that policy makers to act on this. CA people are here, they are the people who decide or who at least prescribe the standards and other things. So we have people from all the different, all the stakeholders, all the players are here, represented here. So I am sure it will be a very fruitful discussion. With this, I welcome you all to this discussion.
So we have a themed speaker, and Mr. Amit Tripathi will take the floor, and he'll talk about what he thinks and where these things should go. And then the rest of the panel will go in sequence and talk about it either through a PowerPoint presentation or maybe just from the notes. They are more than welcome to talk about this subject. And then we'll have a Q&A around it, sir. Mr. Tripathi.
Thank you, Raviji. Thank you, Behera sir. And thank you so much to all the panelists and the audience over here who are present here to, after the lunch, trying to sort of keep themselves awake on this interesting topic that we are going to sort of talk about. Just a second. I have the controller. So my name is Amit Tripathi. I am advisor power sector for CDRI. CDRI stands for Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So quickly, I will just take you to who we are. We are a new entity. Broadly very new entity announced by Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji at UN Climate Action Summit, and we specifically focusing on sort of specific need of critical infrastructure, which is power, transportation, telecommunication, and health infrastructure, and its impact and the impact that it faces due to the climate and disaster risk. Right now, we are a global coalition, and we have right now more than 39 countries who are a global member of our coalition, all sovereign governments, and along with 7 international organizations, including World Bank, ADB, UNDP, UNDRR, and ARISE. We have a global program in various geographies, including Brazil, Chile, India, Bhutan, Nepal, Haiti, and various small island countries right now. Within India, we have a programs on power, transportation, seaport, telecom, and resilient health infrastructure in various states. And Odisha is our champion state. They are the leader in disaster risk management and DRR, disaster risk reduction in state, and have taken this whole narrative and discussion at another level by supporting CDRI in all the initiatives that we have done. So in that sense, Behera ji, Jana sir there at Government of Odisha, they have been our champion and have been supporting us through and throughout. Just to quickly sort of now delve into the topic that Ravi ji has just spoken about, what is impact of disaster on the community? And these are some of the figures which I've shared in earlier times also to a lot of people, but I want to sort of reshare it because just to securitize the issue, because it's very important, because it has a massive impact on the economy and the society and the community that we operate. Cyclone Fani, 2019 economic impact of $9 billion, and power sector alone was close to $1.2 billion US. Winston in Fiji, 1.3 billion, 31% of the GDP of Fiji. Puerto Rico, Hurricane Maria, $91 billion US. Superstorm Sandy, USA, economic impact of $60 billion. These are just estimates. It could be far more. And with the climate change and various other sort of externalities that we are facing globally, this economic loss is going to be in the tune of $1 billion, which is 5% of combined global GDP from going onwards. Just imagine, this is 5% GDP, which you could easily invest in SDGs goal, in a lot of social and other activities that government intend to invest in: schools, hospitals, healthcare, educations. And as per the GAR report, 40% of these natural disasters will increase between the period of 2015 to 2030. So this is not going to subdue. We have to be prepared. So I just wanted to sort of tell you about one of the key comprehensive study that CDRI has been undertaking in Odisha with the support of Government of Odisha in last 2.5 years. It's a comprehensive study that we started after Cyclone Fani in 2019. The Cyclone Fani, as Behera ji sir would know quite clearly, and Chitnis sir would know, in terms of the damage, $1.2 billion of damage. And you just see the amount of infrastructure that got wiped out or damaged in that period. Transmission line, 116 towers were damaged, 2 grids and 250 kilometer lines. Distribution, 2.2 lakh poles were damaged. 1.1 lakh kilometers of line was damaged, and almost more than 12,000 transformers were damaged. Estimated lost, as you could say, electricity consumer along the coast of Odisha, close to 5 million got impacted. And for many weeks, there was an issue, especially in the hinterlands, the power disruption issue to the critical consumers like hospital, water pumps, state departments, cyclone shelters and offices. So it has interdependencies issues which creates havoc in the system and cascading impact over the systems, how you manage even the disaster operations post-disaster events. So for that, we started a sort of a study which sort of focused on the 3 components, component 1, 2, 3. Component 1 talked about the disaster preparedness and management, where it spoke about and worked with the utilities in Odisha on the SOPs, standard operating procedures and various aspects on preparedness and survival, recovery and reconstruction, and various social community resilience. And that we could see a lot of impact at Cyclone Yas. So immediately after Fani, I think Odisha utility was much better prepared, and they have created a template for utilities across the coast of India, and that we could see also at the time of Cyclone Biparjoy, which impacted Gujarat last year, where of course there was no loss of life. Of course, that's a big event itself, but there was a minimum impact on the utilities itself, and because of some of these initiatives which Central Electricity Authority, Odisha government, and they have sort of taken up altogether. Because Central Electricity Authority also after Fani created a cyclone task force, which came up with this very remarkable sort of recommendations and work that needs to be done at that point of time. And then component 2 specifically looked at the risk mapping and improvement of infrastructure, where we did the risk identification, and then we looked at various codes and standards and design and regulation that needs to be updated, changed, and bring into the reality. Various technology and innovation that could be bring into place. And the third, which is the most critical part in power sector, which I say, is the governance. It's a regulated entity. Nothing moves beyond without regulatory oversight. So it needs a proper governance framework in order to address this issue. It can't be in a piecemeal way. So that's why we especially look at the various risk-based governance and policy development issues. We also try to probe how to finance these resilience and adaptation. It costs. And at the end, the tariff which end user pays, there is a very limited window for regulators, for utilities to sort of leeway to actually work around that. There have been a debate around it, whether it should build into tariff or let it be a public investment that happens in recovery and reconstruction and building resilience. That will keep on happening with the guidance of ISGF, CA, and all the regulators. So what we did in risk identification and estimation, if you could, I will just quickly take you through. We did cyclone zonation and flood zonation, and where we did the cyclone microzonation, we did the modeling, we did the cyclone hazard, and then we prepared the cyclone hazard and flood hazard map. And then we moved to the exposure assessment. We specifically looked at the entire assets of Odisha along the coast of Odisha, which is 450 kilometers, from 0 to 60 kilometers. We have our representative from Tata Power, and I think he can talk a little more about it. And then we sort of looked at those asset maps and looked at the various cyclone exposure and flood exposure on that things. And then after that, we did a vulnerability assessment, and we did the vulnerability analysis for the cyclone and flood and various multi-hazard. And then again, we came up with the vulnerability assessment, and after that, we looked at the criticality, because it's not necessary that all the assets which are vulnerable are critical as well. Because at the end, you cannot make every vulnerable asset as critical, because again, it costs. So we have to look at which assets are critical. And then on that basis, the priority assessment was prepared, and prioritization matrix was prepared, and prioritization asset list was prepared for Odisha. So like some of the prioritization matrix, if you say, whether it's critical, yes, vulnerable, high, then distance from the coast. So we have given a different priority in marks and numbers, and we have prepared those matrix for us to understand it. How we did a vulnerable assessment, there's a little more detail. We looked at 16 indicators for the infrastructure vulnerability. 1 to 4 is low vulnerability, and 4 is high vulnerability. And on that basis, we came up with various sort of assessment that we did see. These are the indicators for transmission and distribution sectors. So if you look at some of these indicators that we have prepared, and we had to try to prepare the criticality of it. And where for GSS, we have these indicators, whether it's indoor, outdoor, year of commissioning less than 30, more than 30, failure of histories, type of GSS power supply source, year of same with the transmission line, same with PSS, same with distribution line. And on that basis, we were able to come up with a cost-benefit analysis for entire coast of Odisha from 0 to 60 kilometers, and we were able to identify the and for the critical lines. Although I have not listed the lines here, because of course there's a confidentiality and those all things, but we are working with various stakeholders in Odisha and all the utilities in Odisha and the GridCo on taking it on a priority basis, and where this framework that we have developed right now, which I have just discussed, can be implemented on a regular basis in the Odisha itself, and learning from that can be used to scale up such kind of framework for different utilities in India along the coast, as well as similar geographies, just like, for example, Indonesia, Philippines, which is prone to the cyclones and have massive impact on the infrastructure. Some of the recommendations I will quickly talk about, which we have sort of emerged out of our work, and which is basically, which I have divided into few boxes. One is data collection and management. It's a challenge where data, all sort of a data of utilities. Now in Odisha, because it's privatized, and now they have taken a lot of groundwork on mapping and asset inventarization, but we know that a lot of utilities aren't prepared with the basic asset inventarization effort itself. Then also the climate data. So climate data is a very important thing. It's not something which utility take care of it. It's at the end, it's meteorological department. There's various different agencies who work with them, and there's need for a coordination between these agencies with the state disaster management agencies, with the utilities and critical infrastructure. There's a need for all these entities to talk together and work on a various things. And these are some of the things that we have just looked at, where we need a systematic recording of loss and damage of power sector assets to learn from how to build back better. That itself is missing. Of course, Odisha is a different example because they have been facing this problem so long, so they are prepared better, but not other utilities are. So the systematic recording for the loss and damage to understand where the damage has happened, why it has happened, and how it can be improved, that's important. And where we need to focus now to move focus on sector-focused post-disaster need assessment. Right now, post any disaster, the PDNA, post-disaster need assessment, that is being conducted by various state disaster management agencies, doesn't specifically look very specifically on the sectoral issues. So that needs to be addressed. Of course, the use of digital tool needs to be looked into for various asset inventarization and so forth. Then code, standards, and regulations. Why it's important? So one very startling thing that came out of the study is a wind zone map that we have in India. So wind zone map in India, so just to give you a brief sort of introduction, wind zone is, so various zones in India are divided according to various wind zone. East coast of India, which is Odisha, it's categorized under wind zone 5, where it should be under 6, at least. And that needs to be also revised because wind zone map was, so it was created in 2000, it was updated in 2015, but on the data which was till 2008-9. And we are sitting right now in 2023, 2024. Issue is there is no single agency which coordinate that work on a regular basis to update wind zone map regularly. So there are different agencies. Of course, there is a data that comes from IMD, Indian Meteorological Department. Then there is an agency called Structural Engineering Research Center, which is again a government of India-led agency. And then there is an Indian standard, BIS, which gets feed into that entire codes. Technically, legally, SERC is not mandated to do it regularly. They do it when they are told to do that. And then there's a big vacuum of doing it repeatedly. Even during various stakeholder discussion, for example, by Central Electricity Authority at their Transmission Tower Failure Analysis Committee. And year on year, this has been a big gap, and which have been kept on highlighted by Central Electricity Authority, requesting SERC and Indian standard to upgrade the wind zone map so it reflects the standards. Why it's important? Because wind zone 5 talks about the speed of around 180 kilometers per hour. And at Funny, we have looked at that speed was around 220 kilometers per hour. And this is going to be worse. So all the assets that you're building on the basis of Indian standard codes would be built as per 180 kilometers per hour. For regulator also, it takes a lot of effort to justify that cost. Why to sort of build an asset for example, 260 kilometers per hour, where Indian standard code still talks about 180 kilometers. So there is a gap in terms of updation of these standards and code on a regular basis. Different entities are not talking together, which we would want to sort of create a governance framework within different stakeholders where they can come up for a reliability and resilience matrix specifically for cyclone-specific things, because that's something which is immediate, which takes a lot of toll and has a massive impact on the critical infrastructure piece as well. Then at the we have talked about governance structure needs to be set up within the different stakeholders, and I've just talked about the example of, for example, wind zone map, where we need to sit with Indian standards, IMD, Ministry of Power, NDA for effective preparedness, recovery and mitigation in power sector. Because at the end, utilities look towards these entities to give them guidance, to provide them sort of a common framework to develop assets. At the end, utilities cannot create their own standards and start creating their own work. At the end, they need to be sort of a scientific way and much more coordinated way to go about it. So policy and regulatory framework must be more dynamic in including new technologies. That's something also which we have come. So for example, utilities in Odisha have been trying different style of poles, different style of conductors. But there is a lag in terms, I think there's a lack of getting different approvals from different entities. For example, there are different entities, CPRI, getting their approval and including them in the standards and golden technologies takes a lot of time. So then it needs to be dynamic, it needs to be quick, it needs to be real time. And, and then something which for the regulator, I think Behera sir can throw more light on it, but we thought that it's important. It's not easy because it's a very new field and regulator have a lot other works to do than actually just look at these things, but to include resilience assessment as a mandatory for regulatory approval, sir. We know matter of the fact that it's not happening that regularly. So that's important. Some of the bureaucrats do take it quite seriously. Like for example, a utility in Odisha spoke to for some approval, financial approval, and they got it only on the basis of certain conditions of meeting regulatory resilience by the Cabinet Secretary Office. So there is a push, but it needs to be mainstream and integrated into the governance framework, where regulator forces and nudges utility to look into resilience assessment mandatorily. Regulatory inclusion to ensure that adaptation of disaster resilient practices are there, and also incorporating resilience into infrastructure investment and asset regulators by developing tools to recognize that resilience economic benefits outweighs its cost, because that's important. At the end, regulators need to be justifying the actions that they do, whether they need to pass it on to the end consumer tariff, but it needs to be justified, and we need to give them that tool and support in order to, so that they can do it efficiently, quickly, and on time. And then the financing. Financing is the crux. It's a very important topic. Who finances the resilience? It's not, it costs a lot, and at the end, because we are in an essential service business, consumer gets impacted a lot, especially in developing countries where affordability of power itself is a big issue. So make public fund conditional on resilience, end-to-end integration for new and greenfield infrastructure build out. For example, MOP has a massive scheme of almost 3 lakh crore for RDSS, Revamped Distribution Sector Scheme, and they have also spoken about DRI, Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, but it needs to be more focused. We are trying to recommend if they can specifically dedicated fund for 0 to 60 kilometers of coast as recommended by State Electricity Authority on the entire coast of Odisha, entire coast of India, where they can specifically focus and work and have a dedicated fund for that specific actions. And they can have a various innovative financing mechanism. There are something called CAT bonds, there's something called resilience bond, there's something which utilities can look into. And also at the end, to develop a framework which gives you overview of available financial window within the various international national agencies. India also through NDMA has a big national mitigation fund. Through various soft measures, capacity building measures, NDMA can also assist utilities to take up capacity building initiatives to prepare better preparedness strategy and so on and so forth. So that's something can we work on that thing. Some of the engagement at the end that we are doing in power sector, specifically with the focus on resilient infrastructure in South America, in Chile and Brazil. In Brazil, we are talking about the hydropower resilience program. In small island developing states, we are working on capacity building initiatives. And we have been working through various other technical support initiatives on a disaster preparedness, where we have prepared general advisories and for utilities as well as renewable energy projects. So that's it from my end. So I hope I made some sense. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tripathi. Wonderful overview of the sector, our wonderful comprehensive overview of the topic, resilient disaster or climate resilient grid infrastructure. And he has actually gone by practical cases. Most of the cases are from Odisha. Most of his studies are from Odisha. We have seen it, I have myself seen it from Odisha. In fact, many of you may remember 1999, we called it the super cyclone of Odisha. It has the wind speed that was possibly the highest wind speed recorded in the recent past. And Odisha did not have any preparedness for meeting that kind of issues. We had a very tough time. In fact, the trees fell on the road. We took 7 to 10 days to clear the trees from the road, let alone vehicles moved to restore infrastructure and other things, or even relief reaching the affected people was affected because the roads are blocked. From that, Odisha has gone a long way. In fact, I was the first managing director of the Odisha State Disaster Management Authority after the super cyclone. 2 months after the super cyclone, this body was created. I was the first managing director. We negotiated World Bank loan for this project, and the Odisha has really done well, very well in preparedness. In fact, today, and a number of cyclones have come in the meantime. Cyclone Phylline, Cyclone Hudud, Cyclone Fani, all these things have devastated the Odisha coast, particularly the power infrastructure. But Odisha is quite well prepared today, but disasters are disasters. You can never be always fully prepared, it will always happen, but it's a continuous improvement that is taking place. But Mr. Tripathi, you have given a very real, comprehensive overview on this.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's not the best of the time, probably post-lunch, to be trying to talk about the disasters and climate change and resilience and all those kind of things. But be it as it is, let's discuss what we have. I'm primarily a person who believes in basics to best. If you follow that process, how you start on the basics and go to the best, you're more likely to succeed and less likely to fail because you would be proceeding in an objective manner. Now, I've tried to build up this presentation from that perspective. Now, resilience in Collins' dictionary has been defined in 2 parts. One is something which needs to be strong and not easily damaged. And the second is where there is an ability to recover quickly. Now, some of these points have been touched through the disaster, through R&D and other matters. We'll come to it a little later, but the primary differentiation has to be that there is something which requires developmental aspect and there is something which requires reactive aspect. Now, in the electricity value chain, what are we contributing to the climate change which can be controlled by us? The primary contributor is the heat. And I have depicted here how I think the transformation and the movement of energy generates heat which goes into environment or the ground or whatever it is. The second part is obviously the waste management and the pollution management, and particularly in the generation where we have these fluent gases and all that which cause pollution in the environment. So this is our contribution towards the climate changes. Now there is a mention of sharing. Sharing is a two-way traffic, and it has been well depicted in this one line. दूसरों के साथ किसी बात में हिस्सेदारी करना, that means both have to be partners to agreeing to share. It doesn't happen. It happens on a need-based or under pressure or under direction, which is not the right thing for an industry to happen. The industry should wake up and come together and try and share with each other the best paths. Now, I've listed out what are the sharing opportunities: knowledge, experience, technology development, processes development, practices, and who are the stakeholders in this? Everybody, including the regulator, including the companies, including the customer. Everybody is a part to it. So it has to be a very cohesive participation of everybody if you want to really make an impact on managing our contribution to the adversity of the climate. There have been a lot of technological developments, some of which I have listed out here, which have created a resilience ability for recovery of it happening. Let's understand very clearly, there are two aspects. One is a climate change and one is a disaster. Climate change will happen on an ongoing basis. Disaster is an unknown situation which happens at any time. I'll give you a classic example. In 1995, now in 2005, sorry, we had a cloudburst in Mumbai which was historical, which has not happened for more than 100 years. And it was so heavy in the suburbs that initially we were lost. What to do, how to manage it. So we went through that process of correction, we went through the restorations, pressure, help. After that we made our point to develop ourselves into a disaster management plan. We went to the regulator, we said for disaster management, we require this extra inventory to be kept. The regulator approved on it. So regulator is not necessarily purely looking at the cost, it is also looking at the perspective of why the cost is being incurred. I think we got if I remember correctly, 180 crores worth of inventory management, inventory to be kept only for disaster management. However, what was the disaster was the flooding. Now the topography of Mumbai keeps changing because of this building developments and all that. So in year one, you find 180 points where the flooding was happening. You take corrective action, raise the transformers, whatever needs to be done, you do it. And next time, it comes out to be another 200 points, which get into a flooding situation. So that's where the point of participation, cohesiveness, talking to each other is most essential. And I'm giving you a live example of what is happening in Mumbai. Every year, we find disaster points shifting. You correct one, it happens at other place because 5 buildings have come around without the proper study of the water flow, wind flow and everything. Now what are the key takeaways? Willingness and respect for share. Everybody has to come together. Participation in R&D. I think R&D in electricity sector is not to the extent it should be. We are way behind we are reactive in R&D. De-rating of cables, particularly say for example in Mumbai, there are two players in the de-rating. One is the utility while it lays the cable because it doesn't give the enough gaps in the cables. So you're creating an environment. And two is there's no R&D, none whatsoever as far as I know, where cable manufacturers have come forward and said, we want to do a research into how to do this, how to minimize energy, temperature dissipation in the earth, how to absorb temperature dissipation. I have not come across. I in fact mentioned to one of the cable manufacturers. He said, yeah, it's very important. Let's see what we can do, but nothing has been done. So it has to change our perspective if we really want to address these issues in a constructive manner. Resource planning and preparedness for reactive response, which Mr. Tripathi has mentioned and I had mentioned to you with reference to Mumbai also. I had suggested in the distribution utility meet in Kochi that there's a need to create a disaster response team kind of a structure in India for the electricity business where all should participate, create their resource ability, sharing ability, and then help each other in moving forward. I don't know if something and when something will happen. So that's about it, and I hope I'm within my time frame.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. You have given a very clear definition of resilience. What is meant by resilience is a very nice definition. He has also given his Mumbai experience in handling disaster, particularly the 2005 floods. It was a major flood, I remember. I remember because that time, 2005, my son completed engineering. He joined Maruti. So he was having his service training in Mumbai, and that is when this flood came. For 2 days we could not connect him. We could not speak to him for days. We were really worried what happened. So 2 days there was no communication at all. Then some message through somebody, we located him. I remember that incident very well, that 2005 incident. You have narrated very well your experience. Now he has located my presentation, I believe. I will come to my presentation. stakeholders in this exercise. I'll talk of the responsibilities of different stakeholders in this process. Next. Okay. Climate change management, basically there are two aspects of climate change management. One is mitigative measures, the other is adaptive measures. Mitigative measures means you have to reduce the greenhouse gases. Whatever various methods are there, like mitigating the CO2, methane, whatever are the greenhouse gases, you have to reduce that. So all this commitment we are making at the global level regarding the this greenhouse gas levels and other things. So really, so bring down the greenhouse gases through various processes, or your production processes, your being such that like burning of hydrocarbons and other things, reducing hydrocarbon consumption. So you can bring down greenhouse gases. So this is a global issue. The whole world has a combined responsibility for this. One country cannot do it. Everybody has to jointly do it. And if I do it, it will help you. If US does it, it will help Asia also. If India does it, it will help China. So it is basically a global responsibility, combined responsibility. Of course, India is a leader in this aspect now. India has made very bold commitments in this regard, regarding reducing the greenhouse gases, and we have been meeting those commitments also, and we have made major commitments at the World Forum to reduce the level of greenhouse gases. That is a separate point. But you reduce the greenhouse gases, then the climate change or global warming effect will come down. But then there are adaptive measures. Adaptive measures means, should there a major weather event occur, or should there, let's say, sea level rise, or should there be erratic weather, what should be our adaptive measures? There is no escape from this. This is a national issue. While mitigating measures are global issues, adaptive measures are national issues, local issues. We have to face it ourselves. So we have to adapt to live with it. So these measures have to be taken for survival and sustenance. Each country, organization, society, rich or poor, needs to act. If India, you cannot depend on somebody else's action. You have to fend for yourself. If this situation happens, a community has to suffer, a community has to face it, a state has to face it, a country has to face it. So they have to, at their own level, they have to take these actions. But all these measures involve cost. Mitigation measures have a choice between development and environment. Mitigation measures, if you do not, if you go about burning hydrocarbon or doing all those manufacturing processes and others which cause greenhouse gases, you basically balance between development and environment. If you have to protect environment, development gets affected to some extent. Development does get affected to some extent. So there is a choice between the two. You can bring about a balance. Your development can also be environment friendly, but there is a cost for it. But so there is there is a choice between development and environment. But adaptive measures doesn't have any choice. You have to take that. So one such thing is electricity grid. Electricity grid is a critical infrastructure that needs to be robust and resilient. Already a lot of things have been spoken about that. I will not go into this again. It is the total value chain from the generation point to the consumer point. The grid is from the generation point to the consumer point. Global warming is increasing the cooling load, particularly for countries like India, more pressure on that. Because of global warming, our temperature level is increasing. So your load is increasing. So basically you have to prepare for higher loads, particularly in summer. This is for India. Maybe it is a different thing for Canada. Canada, their cooling load may not, in fact, they possibly like warming to take place. Canada has places like Canada, Iceland, or Russia. Possibly they would want a little more, but there are other effects also. Not just warming. There are other effects also. Other effects of global warming are heat waves, wildfires, erratic rainfall, flooding, cyclones, rising seawater level. These all have disastrous effects. We have to get, you have to take adaptive measures for this. Increasing frequency of extreme weather events is a dominant cause of large-scale outage. In the grids, in the context of grid, large-scale outages are attributable to this erratic events. Okay. Recovery, the ability to restore the system's function early. Mr. Mehta has very nicely described it. A more resilient electric system with a well-coordinated contingency plan for communications, temporary assets, and workforce will recover faster from the interruptions caused. We have seen in Odisha there has been so many cyclones, particularly for electricity infrastructure. When you go about restoring the electricity lines, we do not get the skilled workforce. And we have to depend on contractors and laborers coming from Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal. So when we go beforehand, we always keep a kind of list of vendors who are there in Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, certain other parts of the country. They are immediately drafted. So you need a contingency plan for that. So this is also a very important area. Getting workforce, having a proper list of vendors and workforce who can be drafted in short notice, because you don't get time, and people are not prepared to take outage for a day today. Those days in 99 our restoration took about a month. Electricity infrastructure took about a month to restore in Odisha in 99. But today people are not prepared for one day, not even for 24 hours, and we have been able to do it now. We are now, the Fani was the recent, Mr. Tripathi described that Fani was the recent major cyclone in 2019. It affected this CESCO area, Central Electricity Company area. They did a wonderful job in restoring it very quickly. And here you have to make the system resilient, means you have to spend money on that. One IES study says, for every dollar invested in climate resilient infrastructure, $6 can be saved. This is IES study. If you make your system resilient, you can save a lot of money in other areas. In other areas, your saving will be in other areas. Altogether, $6 can be saved. This is a study by IEA. If the action needed for resilience are delayed by 10 years, the cost will almost double. This is another World Bank study. Stakeholder. Who are the stakeholders? System operators and regulators to assess the situation constantly to ensure the adequacy, flexibility and stability of services needed for secure operation of the system. Both system operators as well as regulator, they have this responsibility. System operators to constantly update on new technologies. Policy makers to bring in input from other authorities and stakeholders into the process. One of the major players in this is IMD. India Meteorology Department. In fact, they have done an excellent job now. Now IMD is very good in predictions and other things like cyclone, the landfall point, speed, etc. IMD has done a wonderful job over the years. In fact, in 1999 when Odisha cyclone took place, we depended on one US Navy site which projected that cyclone and that speed and other things. You depended on that. We got that data, but our IMD was not that. Their predictions were not so very. There used to be a lot of jokes about IMD predictions those days. Earlier days, like if IMD said that it will rain today, that it will not rain. There used to be the jokes those days. Those are jokes, of course. But IMD today is very, very sophisticated, and their predictions are extremely good. I have seen this Phylline, Fani. Phylline was in 2013 in Odisha. Fani was in 2019. In between there was a Hudhud which affected Vizag and other areas. So their predictions have been absolutely accurate. So coordinating between these kind of agencies, the utility doesn't have to go for predicting speed, rains and other things now. There are other agencies. These agencies are doing it. So the policy makers will have to link them, getting the weather department and these people together. This is they can do it. Regulators to assign responsibility for coordinated action between the operators of the transmission and distribution systems, including where systems are transmission is another utility, distribution is another utility. Their zone of this thing is different. They have to, regulator has to clearly define that, and between the interconnection point also has to be clearly defined, and the regulator has a big job here. Policymakers and regulators to create appropriate incentives for utility to facilitate timely investment in resilient infrastructure, because somebody has to put in this money. I remember 99 cyclone, we had just privatized these discoms that time. American Electric Supply was the 51% equity in this CESCO, Central Electricity Company, which covers 8 districts of Odisha, including Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, Puri, all major coastal districts, which was hit by cyclone that time. 10,000 persons died in that super cyclone of 1909. AES was they were the 51% equity holder in this CESCO. They didn't know what to do. It required such a huge amount of money for restoring this infrastructure, required such a huge amount of money. It is just beyond the means of the utility to do that. And there is no, in their, kind of job responsibility, what the utility has to do or the private partner of the utility will do, there is no clarity on that. Government of Odisha said that you are the 51% equity, you have to restore this thing and you have to do it. Government of Odisha was also passing through a bad time that time. Resource position of Government of Odisha was not good. Fortunately, it has improved much. Since 2005, Government of Odisha's finances are very good, thanks to the bounty of revenue coming from the mining, which was caused because the amendment in the MMDR Act, which required auction for mining, so you get a lot of revenue from that. Like where we are not getting 2,000-3,000 crores a year, we are now getting about 60,000 crores. So Odisha government, so now Odisha government is in a better position to fund this kind of things. 1999, that cyclone time they are not. So what happened? AES worked out finally, where AES could not handle this. This kind of major disaster, spending so much money, how they will recover that money also, because this money, if the utility spends this money, this has to come from through tariff again. It has to maybe spread over a longer period, but it has to come through tariff. So that clarity was not there, and this is one of the major reasons why AES left that time. Our reforms exercise failed then because of this major crisis. In principle, the licensee has the responsibility in protecting its assets and providing reliable services to its customers. But the benefits of huge capital investments are likely to become tangible only after a few years or even decades. You don't see the benefits immediately. You spend a lot of money upfront, but you don't see the benefits immediately. And obviously, recovering the cost becomes difficult. It has to be spread over a very long time. But sometimes it may not be possible for a utility to so the regulator had to think of other ways of how to meet this cost. If a utility spends this kind of money, how to meet it. So, because it's a monopoly, the utility business is a monopoly business, so regulators and policymakers will have to see how this has to be addressed. So, large capex will increase the tariff, no doubt. Increase the tariff has a huge political cost. No political government can afford to allow huge tariff increase because of this huge capital cost. So government support becomes this has to be appreciated by the government, and it has to be addressed. I mean, major part of climate resilience work should be addressed, should be funded by government. Maybe union government or state government, it has to be funded by government to a large extent. Otherwise, the cost will pass on to the consumers, which is not feasible. So again, recovery plan, a lot of things have been spoken about recovery plan, I will not speak much. You have to have once this kind of event takes place, there has to be recovery plan. Everybody has a role in this, policymakers, regulators, system operators, to coordinate efforts among diverse actors, weather forecasting agencies, communication agencies, mass media, local administration including Panchayat Raj institutions, community groups, etc. Everybody has a role to play in this, in the recovery plan. And policymakers, regulators and system operators to support capacity building for a better response to and faster recovery from climate. In fact, these two things what I am saying here, lot of things have been addressed in Odisha's recovery plan. You would know that. This has been, and in fact, our support from the World Bank, a lot of these things have been addressed through that, whether, kind of warning agents, exercise and other things, building up groups quickly. When there is an event, we have to build those groups quickly. So certain infrastructure, certain programs have been created for that. So this also will have to be taken care of. So this is what I have to say now. With this, I will conclude and go over to the next speaker now. I will request Madam Mrs. Mr. Chintamani Chitnis, the Chief Technology Manager of TPCODL, Tata Power Central Odisha Distribution Limited. Please.
So, good afternoon to the distinguished dignitaries on the dais and friends who have been here. I would request you all to put this on the presentation board. So, taking forward what Behera sir probably said, the Odisha story in terms of, kind of handling these cyclones and what you call climate weather things that we get, they have, kind of built this over the years, and I would actually narrate to you the real experience that we have had in Odisha over these years, and of course the history of it and how we are progressing into various aspects which Amit and Behera sir and of course Seethapathy sir had narrated. So what exactly happens, and more so the focus would be on the distribution utility. So what exactly happens when these weather events strike a distribution utility? So we see it in two forms. One is of course flooding, one is the cyclone part of it. So of course the distribution infrastructure gets impacted, consumers are getting impacted. And a very important point that we people were saying in terms of the thermal effect, that is the temperature has been increasing today. Last year we saw maximum peak in the state of Odisha crossing 6,000 megawatt. And what we are trying to say is the temperature effects actually lead to a thermal runaway of equipments. That is, the rating of the equipments, as he was mentioning earlier, need to be really looked at in terms of what do we do next. So therefore, we have chalked out a program where we do a kind of risk assessment in terms of what actually would be the risk associated with these climate events. We go about actually seeing this with respect to the engineering changes that can be done. And of course, technology plays a very important role in all this. And the response to any kind of emergency is very important, which I would kind of narrate as we go along. And of course, pumping into investment for building upon a infrastructure which is able to withstand all these vagaries of the climate. So if you see Odisha, all along the coastline, it has been inundated with kind of cyclones right from the year 1999, where we saw the super cyclone happening. The wind speed was of the range of 250 kmph. I mean, it is mind-boggling. You just cannot, kind of design your structures then to this kind of a devastating disaster that we saw. And all along the years we have been seeing the latest, of course, what we saw, of course, in 21, 22. So this has been happening. So touch wood, we are still not had anything for the last couple of years. And of course, our systems have built in to take care of this. There are two areas where Odisha probably has to face this kind of a calamity. One is the flood part of it, and one is the cyclone part of it. So here you see the flood map of Odisha. As he says, it might not be updated, but I have picked up from whatever sources I could get. So Odisha has got a kind of a 9 river system where major rivers are there, its tributaries are there, its sub-tributaries are there, which lead to flooding at various low-lying areas, the catchment areas. So this of course leads to the infrastructure getting flooded. So what we have done is that we have tried to create assets which are now getting designed above the high flood level, and all those substations would be at an elevated plinth level. Additionally, the substations are built above the road level. The older stations are kind of getting, renovated to meet these conditions. The second part and a very important part is the wind zoning part of it. So along with TCE, we carried out actually a wind study of the geography that we operate in. So as he said, 0 to 60 kilometers was what he was referring all this time in terms of the coastal. I'll just take this pointer so that I'll be able to, this kind of, yeah. So 0 to 60 kilometers along the coastline is a very important area where the maximum impact on your equipments is seen. So we actually saw and calculated the actual design wind speed for various distances from the coastline. So I'll not get into details of the calculations. What we get is that for this kind of a terrain and this kind of area, we normally see 260 kmph speed that would be seen, which is actually also recorded in these events that we see here with whatever, IS 875 part 3 is what we speak of. Of course, that needs to be, in your words, updated. Of course, this will happen. So, this actually we tested it for the existing pole designs that we had and kind of saw that this wind pressure that actually builds with a ISMB of 200 mm H pole or a WPP pole, this actually defeats the utilization. Anywhere the utilization ratio has to be below 1 so that we are safe with it. So nowhere do we see that this ratio being below 1. So what we did is, out of the recommendations that came out, we actually reduced the span length. We actually converted the WPP poles into H pole so as to bring down the utilization factor to less than 1 and therefore kind of mitigate this risk. However, this is not done. So what we actually did is that along with TCE, we designed something called as a rebar tower, which actually replaces the normal poles, and this is able to withstand a wind speed of 300 kmph. This has been tested at CPRI, so that we are very sure that what we are installing actually withstands what we install. So this has actually been installed on the Puri Marine Drive, which is actually getting affected in all the cyclones. So all along we have been doing, and of course this also has an added advantage in terms of the insulated cross arms, so that the creepage distance also increases, and that is aiding to the kind of resilience that we have. So these disaster preparedness for various kinds of eventualities are there. I mean, critical installations, as we said, have got a DG backup available in terms of hospitals, and this happened in 2021 when we were in the thick of COVID and cyclone Yas had hit. But we had been able to kind of come back with the government of Odisha in less than 72 hours in getting all these installations up and running with DG sets, with power supply backup. There are mobile transformers which are there, which can be moved along in when your actual transformers get submerged, and there are central stores available at each of various locations so that we can move along the equipment. There is no problem in terms of the movement. So this actually makes us prepared in terms of this thing. So the point that Seethapathy sir said, do we go for underground cabling or do we have overhead network that is there? So of course overhead network is prone to damage very quickly in terms of whatever wind speed I spoke, though we are investing a lot, we are investing in technology to get this done. So overhead prefers to over the underground part of it in ease of maintenance, fault identification, less time for rectification, of course the cost part of it. So this actually is not a clear answer. It has to be a mix in terms of the underground part in the first 0 to 20 kilometers band, which we probably are suggesting, and of course these reinforced rebars that we have on the along further down the line. So it can be specific to site conditions. Totally converting it to underground in these areas would actually amount to a lot of cost, which probably may not be the right approach. In cities like Mumbai or Delhi, places where urban infrastructure exists, there is no other option than underground, so which of course we do. So in terms of weather forecasting, what sir was mentioning, we have actually developed an internal portal where various web services are taken. If you see on the right side, we have AccuCheck, we have IMD, we have certain other weather forecasters which actually tell us the live weather that is available, and this is accuracy is actually compared, and then we try to see a single source which is better accurate in terms of going ahead with that. In addition to that, we have also had individual weather stations installed across our geography, of course in the process of getting them there, so that particular climate conditions would be known to that area also. So this has been done so as to forewarn us in terms of the weather conditions that we have. So all along this, we have been speaking about the rationale that we have. That is, it is very likely that we would be facing these cyclones or weather events, but we have to come out better out of that, build back better. So 4 or 5 areas that we attacked. One is safety, which is very important in all these areas. It so happens that this gets a back seat and there are casualties happening even in the time of restoration. So there is a robust safety management process that is put in place. Faster restorations means faster socio-economic loss. We get a reduced kind of thing, infrastructure, of course reduction in that with the help of resilient infrastructure, and technology has played a greater role, I will emphasize, as we moved across. So there is a planned disaster management structure that exists at 2 levels. One is at the corporate level, one is at the actual field, and various responsibility centers are there. There is a core assessment team, there is a coordination that happens with the government agencies, there is a backup support team. So all this is in place today. We are in a state of readiness to kind of handle any kind of emergencies that happen. So this is what Behera sir was mentioning. So today, with the help of the government and the DISCOMs, we are better prepared to handle any kind of eventualities if at all they arise. So this is I will not go into the details of it. So this tells you that we have emergency restoration systems in terms of the mobile transformers, in terms of the ERT, transmission towers, stores are put up at various places. There are communication happening in terms of specific communication going to consumers for informing them. The local skilled and unskilled workforce which he was mentioning, we have got a tie-up in terms of identifying them and activating them whenever the need so arises. And it has so happened that 4 DISCOMs are Tata Power DISCOMs, and we trying to collaborate resources, because some of the DISCOMs are likely to get impacted, others are not. So we try to move the people from one place to another. So various initiatives under the technology part in terms of GIS, in terms of SCADA, in terms of having what you call satellite communication available in term whenever your other means of communication goes fat. And a GIS system has also played a lot of role in terms of actually tracking our asset and movement of the cyclone. I will just show you as we go along. So here what you see in Odisha, there is a peculiar feature called as Kal Baisakhi. That is but a local kind of a cyclone happens. So live monitoring is what you see here in the city of Bhubaneswar, which happens, which tells us the status of an infrastructure, which any SCADA system does, but this is more so designed in terms of telling us any real-time situation that happens. Further drilling down, what are the assets which are up, down, whatever, and the load curve is also getting monitored dynamically. And this is what I was mentioning too. So we have what is called as an ESRI GIS system, wherein all our assets and area is mapped. So this is our area of operation. So there is a web plugin of a weather forecaster can be done, so that this movement of the cyclone can actually be traced, and we would know which of our area is coming under the influence of this cyclone and which assets are likely to get hit, and therefore we are better prepared to know where we have to mobilize our resources. So this has been done, and this has been very effective. Likewise, we see on the right is actual heat map of the areas that are affected in cyclone Yas. And lastly, I would say that we have been able to pool resources. Government of Odisha as well as the regulator has been kind enough to sanction some 100+ crores as a pool which will be available for all the 3 DISCOMs, and a central stores is established at western Odisha, which is not likely to get impacted, and therefore there is a common pool of resources available for all of us to take across. So this is what I had to share in terms of the actual kind of dealing that we are doing in terms of the cyclone or the flooding part of it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chitnis. He has given a very, very elaborate arrangement that his utility has done. regarding handling this kind of disasters, particularly cyclone. His distribution company is prone to cyclone. In fact, every year you saw he gave a chart, every year 2-3 cyclones are hitting Odisha coast, some very serious. So they have to prepare this, and good that they have created it now corpus of 134 crores and created the infrastructure and other things. Central store maintained at a strategic place which is normally not affected by this thing. So these are good takeaways for other areas, like for creating this kind of infrastructure. It can happen anywhere in fact. In fact, entire Odisha coast is prone to cyclone, but there are other kinds of disaster also which one can think of, and this is a good takeaway from this presentation, that how a utility can be prepared for this kind of events. Thank you, Mr. Chitnis. Now I will request Mrs. Singhal. Your presentation is ready now? Okay, please kindly.
So, good afternoon everybody. My presentation would mainly be focusing on what we have done in CEA to mitigate the impact of disasters that we have been facing over the last few years. So disasters, as we all know, they always involve loss or damage to the infrastructure of the country, and in order to eliminate, if not possible, to minimize damage in generation, transmission and distribution of electricity, several steps have been taken in CEA. So we with the involvement of all the stakeholders, disaster management plan is worked out, and the latest was in the year 2022. It provides a framework and direction to the utilities in the power sector for all phases of the disaster management cycle, that is mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. It gives a holistic and integrated approach for strengthening disaster mitigation, preparedness, emergency response and recovery in the event of any disaster taking place. These are the main objectives of the disaster management plan: to improve state of preparedness to meet any contingency, to reduce response time in organizing the assistance, to identify major resources, manpower, material and equipment needed to make the plan operational, making optimum use of the combined resources. These are the main pillars of the disaster management plan: the Sendai framework, sustainable development goals and the climate change agreement. This is again a repetition of what I said earlier. These are the major recommendations that we have made in the disaster management plan. For cyclone prone areas, the power plant structure should be designed taking into account the wind loads. I think much has already been said by my earlier speakers. Then technologies like cables, utility tunnels, gas insulated substations, lines, this should be explored. Existing overhead distribution system, which is more prone to disasters, should be replaced as far as possible by underground cables, though underground cables are more costly as compared to the overhead system, but overall if we see, they are not affected in case any disaster takes place, and we the cost, overall cost is less. Then the reduction in the lower overall tower span, which was earlier mentioned by my counterpart. Then smaller height of towers should be preferred in coastal areas. High tension, low sag and high ampacity conductors to be used in coastal areas. Then anti-corrosion paints, raised chimneys and epoxy based resins for reinforcement in foundations could be adopted. For distribution system, upgrading concrete poles to steel or a composite material and installing support wires. Layout of the distribution network should be such that they form a ring for better operational convenience, reliability and faster restoration. The utility should follow CA. There is another regulation by the name of safety requirement for construction, operation and maintenance of electrical plants and lines. This should be followed by all the utilities. Substations of transmission and distribution network should be built on a raised platform. Flood damage can also be prevented by using use of GIS substations, saltwater resistant equipment. Heavy equipment including transformers are required to be logged with the foundation so that they are not impacted in case of disaster. Power sector establishment to avoid high seismic zones or to be designed based on BIS codes. Lightning arresters and sound earthing for each building. Then these are the regulations which have been amended recently in 2022. Technical standard for construction of electric plants and lines. These are the major provisions that have been revised. These regulations apply to all the utilities in power sector and are mandatory in nature. Then regulation 44(3)(a) it states that design consideration for substation and switchyard 66 kV and above. Gas insulated substation shall be constructed in seismic prone areas, coastal areas, high altitude areas, very heavy polluted areas, and for locations where space is a major constraint. Then regulation 51, general considerations for 33/11 kV, 33/22 kV and 22/11 kV substations and switching stations in coastal areas shall be gas insulated substations. Then 75(4), in coastal areas distribution transformer shall be indoor or package type or plinth mounted. Then for design of transmission line structures in eastern coast and Gujarat coast up to 60 km from sea coast, importance factor for cyclonic region, that is K4 factor of 1.3 shall be considered to take care of cyclonic wind conditions. Frequency of patrolling of transmission lines should be increased for vulnerable tar locations, that is thunder prone, cyclone prone areas and in theft prone areas. In coastal areas, high strength poles like rail poles or spun poles should be used. Then suitable insulating panes should be preferably be provided on bare conductors in coastal areas to prevent corrosion as well as in power theft prone areas. In coastal areas, underground cables shall be used. Then there is another major development. There is a DRIPS portal has been developed. It is disaster resource inventory for power sector. It is still to be formally launched, but all the developmental works have been done by CA in collaboration with NIC. There was a direction from the ministry to develop this portal. On this portal, all the utilities can readily see the availability of resources across the country and take quick decisions for requisitioning these resources for mitigating the impact of disaster. Like in case any disaster strikes any utility and that utility is not having that major particular equipment which it requires to mitigate the impact of disaster, then it can on this portal it can see where it is available with any other utility, and then it can requisition that equipment from that other utility. This portal would be hosted on the National Power Portal of CEA. The inventory list for essential equipment was finalized after several rounds of deliberations with stakeholders, mainly DISCOMs, transmission companies and generation companies. Development of this, like already said, it has already development has been completed, but it is formally to be launched by Honorable Minister in the near future. These are the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Singhal. She has talked about those standards and designs and other things, and there was a huge dose of cyclone, but she along with Mr. Mehta have given some perspective into the flood, which is also one of the major disasters affecting many parts of the country. So she has covered quite a lot about weather resilient, flood resilient structures and things and design of that. So We're really grateful to you for giving us this perspective. Now I would request Mr. Senapati. Mr. Senapati is the head of sales and commercial services of L&T.
Good afternoon. I am S.K. Sinapati. I am from L&T Power Transmission and Distribution Digital Energy Solutions. So I will take you today a few of the digital technologies which is required for this resilience and the disaster management. So before that, just I will give a bit of this disaster management, how L&T's power transmission and distribution is associated. So today if you will see the east and south coast, normally every round this time I think round the year the cyclone strikes, and there if you see under the National Cyclone Program, L&T has done the underground cabling systems in Kadalur, in Visakhapatnam, in Haldia, and definitely Puri, that is under the state government when Sir was there in DC and Chief Minister office that point of time we have done. And a lot of digital, a lot of cyclone resilient practices we have suggested there, especially in Odisha, like transmission line we suggested to go ahead with the monopole towers and bit of higher design. Today CDRI was talking about the zone 5, we suggested go beyond bit of zone 5, keep the resilience there. If wind speed increases, then it will take care. We have done a design for distribution towers for 300 km/h speed that point of time. And if you see our Puri substations, Puri we have done revamp of 4 distribution substations. All are elevated to take care of your tsunami or to take care of the flood, manage the flood. And in the distribution strengthening projects in Odisha, distribution, all flood zone areas, the substations are elevated. And lot of areas we have done covered conductors and all. And I think when Sir was mentioning Pailin, Hudhud, and Fani, all the 3 cyclones, I was the person to doing the disaster recovery of all the distribution and transmission line from L&T side, and there is always a call when there is a problem there. So just trying to give a brief on that. Always the subjects excites me. So I'll take you now to the presentation. So this is what the impact it makes if you have a cyclone climate resilience system. So it takes care of the safety of the human being, it takes care of the economic stability, it preserves the ecosystem, sustainability definitely, and definitely protecting the infrastructure. Then key challenges I'll just touch upon. So limited access to the technology and information. So I'll only focus on this particular thing in my next slides. Adequate infrastructure, population growth, short-term focus, lack of public awareness. Then all those I'm not reading out all. So just I'll give 3 areas. One is definitely cyclone which we are talking, the tsunami, the flood. So the technology, like when I was working with some of the states with the World Bank scheme. So it is like flood, how we can, first you have to predict the flood. How we predict the flood? So it is like something like cloud radar, level of the river and level of the your dams. So all together put in your model and it will tell you what, and the measurement of the rain actually. Rain is in the ground level. So all these parameters feed into that, just showing that Vietnam, how they are managed. And today, tsunami, basically we have a your sensors are there, then GPS technology is there, so there we can do a management. And Bangladesh, similar things has happened. So, just I am giving a context there. Right there in Puri, you have put a SCADA, DMS and OMS system. I think Tata Power has now improved that version as a central managing the thing. And there we have put our OMS system basically, the outage management system. So, something happens, and it is integrated to the GIS, and you get a data in your centralized control center, and you isolate, if there is a fault in particular, you isolate that and restore the rest of the things. Then your system is connected to the field force automation, and the team goes and attends that. So that way we manage the whole of cyclone restoration thing. And when you come in talking to the wildfire, it's a bit different, because wildfire you have to take the imagery, satellite imagery of the vegetation, then and the weather data, then it feeds to your ADMS system, and you take a call. Today we said, okay, so cyclone thing and all, you can do the auto reclosure and sectionalizer thing. There, though auto reclosure is there, we manages with the manual function of the auto reclosure. So somebody checks, then closes the breaker. So that sort of thing we do. Definitely GIS mapping helps. One thing, important thing I just want to indicate here. So cyclone basically have, it depends a lot of things on the vegetation. You have a distribution line, your transmission line. So if your vegetation and your corridor is clear, then you have less likely have that impact on the transmission lines or distribution lines. So sometimes we do a light drone survey, and we do a satellite imagery, both the system, even we have that sort of solutions, and we fit to our model, and it gives the where the problem is, and it takes care of the tree cutting. It is a very miniature in nature. Drone goes and cuts, or manually it goes and cuts. So at least we know there is a problem, and we address those problems. So these are some of the wildfire restoration cases, which is in Canada. So here the main idea of this climate resistance and disaster management, first you should have the data in your PT. First is data. You have your sensors, there you get the data. Then you analyze the data. Then you put your AMA model to predict. Then you respond. So this is the main idea of this climate resilience. And once the impact has happened, then your GIS will tell, your outage management will tell where the impact has happened. Then you dispatch your, you do your auto reclosure sectionalizer thing, dispatch your field force to manage that, and all these things happen after map. So these are the, you know everybody, AML, digital twin, those are the areas, I think whole ecosystem, people, the various organizations are working, like various utilities are working. I think you need to be very conscious and start doing those things. It's like funny, I was right there, sir, in Bhubaneswar, and the whole city was out of power for 5-6 days. and when it was told, oh, there is no power supply to Secretariat, hospital, airport. So we are doing there, right there, all the underground systems we are executing. Then we feed the power through a 132 kV cable to a particular substation to power up this critical installations, physical installations there in Bhubaneswar. So I think that is very important. And this comes also as a cyclone or storm management, and we have something called like storm assist, and that will your predict based on today. A lot of things are happening. Like I think we have in our east coast and the Doppler radar that gives a lot of information about the movement of the storm, movement of the cyclone. So I think 200 kilometers distance. So that data, weather data, and the storm assist together, including GIS mapping and other technology, it predicts the storm. So I thought all is the takeaway is that we should definitely utilize these digital technologies to predict, manage the disaster. And today we have IoT devices, satellite imagery, or analytics platforms to do that. And definitely GIS, mapping, and remote sensing technologies. All these things are being modeled with our advanced predictive analytic platform with AI. So that is definitely there. And it is not only required for the GIS, every time it monitors the whole ecosystem. So, and there is a disaster, definitely it will help. But it continuously 24/7 monitors the whole health of the transmission distribution infra. So, and lastly, this definitely I spoke about SCADA, DMS, OMS, and other applications like field force automation and our vegetation management. That is definitely going to help managing a cyclone and wildfire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Senapati. You have given us a broad overview of the technology, various technologies available and the developments in the field of technology for addressing these issues. You have given some practical examples of how we have handled it in Odisha and other places. We have gained from your valuable discourse in this area. Thank you, Mr. Senapati, for that. Now I'll come to Mr. Daniel. He is the Vice President of IT Business Partner Corporate, PTPLN of Indonesia. Will you have a different experience from a different country? But Indonesia is also very much prone to various kinds of disasters, being a nation of many islands. Naturally, they are also prone to this kind of disasters. So he will speak us about his experience in Indonesia in this area.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, esteemed speakers, I'm honored here to share experiences from PLN. My name is Daniel Tampobolan. Well, for the last 15 years, I focused in distribution planning, and just this year, I become the Vice President of IT Business Partner, specifically in digitalizing all the business process in PLN. So, on my presentation today, I will share a number of strategy. I have picked up only the recent ones, and then I will carry it out and by starting with the why we should put attention on resilience. And then I'll cover one initiative per sector, generation, transmission, distribution, since we are a vertically integrated state utility in Indonesia. And then at the end of my presentation, I will share a bit about the cyclone called Seroja in 2021 and how PLN recovered from that. The first one, why should power utilities move towards resilience? If we look from the point of view of risk, well, most power utilities respond, including PLN so far, responds only for the risk with high probability and high impact, but kind of ignore the risk which is less likely to happen but has catastrophic impact, and that's where resilience area sit. So we have put a number of emerging risks that could affect the future grid. The first one is cyber tech, could be the one. Climate change, of course, accelerated aging of our assets, and energy security, and also for the business, because we also need to be resilient on the business part, the grid parity. This is one risk for the resilience in the business scheme. And we have so many key resilience initiatives, such as climate resilient design for the assets, transmission, the poles, and flexible generation. This is to welcome the renewable energy, especially the intermittent ones, the predictive maintenance, way ahead to know the aging of the assets, resource sharing, this is very important, zero downtime system, customer excellence, because, well, at the end, we have to make sure that customers are satisfied, and the robust cybersecurity. But for these slides, we'll be focusing on the climate resilience. The first on the generation. There are two initiatives here I put. The first one is realizing that Indonesia is an archipelagic country comprising of 17,000 islands. And we have to make sure that power and the lights keeps on every premise. So there is a challenge in transporting all the fuel, whether it's fuel, oil, and coal, to all the places in Indonesia, the 17,000 islands. Five of them are the big islands. We have to consider the storm, the weather, and all the changes across the years. And we have to be able to have this primary energy stock, the minimum primary energy stock, which is regulated 2 weeks until 1 month. It has to be sustained. And with that, we have to track all the fleet, all the shipping, all the transport of the fuel and the coal from all over Indonesia. And we are supported by a strong ERP mechanism that gives us visibility in resource sharing from one province to other province, from one island to other islands. On the right side is flexible generation. We are building flexible generation capability on some of our power plants, and this is to welcome the renewable energy penetration, the massive penetration, so we could withstand, the grid could withstand the intermittency of the renewable energy. Second one, on the transmission, on the operational resilience. We have layered control center starting from the SCC, the system control center on each province, especially the big ones, and then will be aggregated in the NCC, National Control Center, and will be backed up by the DRC, Disaster Recovery Center. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look back at time, if we could divide the era in Indonesia, like the gentleman said, before 2000 and after 2000, we could find out that the frequency of major natural disaster moving more and more frequent. Before 2000, it happens averagely every 3.5 years, the major natural disaster. I mean, every 13.5 years. But after 2000, the frequency becomes 3 years on average. Every 3.5 years, there will be a major natural disaster. And on the last slide, I'll be talking about the last cyclone that we have in eastern Nusa Tenggara. Here also, we should not ignore as well the distribution network that should be resilient. And we have built and established 3 ultimate designs in designated and in focused areas, VIP areas, where international events occur. In Jakarta, in Tangerang, and in Eastern Nusa Tenggara as well, because we have Labuan Bajo as one of the premium tourism center. Yeah, the very place that is prone to cyclone. So we've established a zero downtime system. We call it, the system becomes a zero downtime system. There are actually 4 signatures of this ultimate design The first one is the infrastructure is to be built underground, so undergrounding the cable. The second one is the topology. Yeah, we put the very mature topology, which is fully loop topology. And third one is the advanced automation equipped with early warning system and power backup. And the third one is fully infrastructure, the fiber optic for the media of communication. And by doing so, we have secured so many international events like ASEAN Summit, like G20 and so on and so on, on those three areas that are prone to cyclone or flood. So this is becomes one design, becoming maybe one blueprint to be disseminated to other prone areas to natural disaster. Here I put 3 slides, yeah, to give like an experience what happened in 2021. Cyclone called Saroja in eastern Nusa Tenggara. Well, to put it in context, eastern Nusa Tenggara itself comprises or consists of more than 1,000 islands. So you could imagine that we have 3 big systems over there, but thousands of isolated systems. So when it happens like stated in the slide, 2,887 distribution transformer is going down, disrupted, and then experienced by almost 500,000 customers. So this is very, very bad. PLN carried out a strategic recovery that I will show you on the next slide to gradually. So actually, on the first day, there have been places that restoring the power. They gradually restore power, and 100% restored in 9 April. So it took 5 days for total recovery. Here, just like the gentleman said, our CEO has this structure of disaster management structure, like a task force, and by having that, all the resource could be mobilized as soon as possible. So actually at that time, PLN mobilized 723 manpower from 26 distribution units from all the region of Indonesia, because we have to cover thousands of islands, not only the big system, but also the isolated ones. And by the leadership of our CEO, all the materials, all the equipment, all the power backup, gensets, and especially all the manpower is mobilized to the very location. And then we also have this emergency tower. So only took like a couple of hours, yeah, to build this emergency tower. And after the cyclone Saroja, actually we already equipped with this one on all the provinces, because we could not know actually where the cyclone would happen. So this emergency tower of 70 kV established as one of the highest tower even been set up with a height of 61 meter. So some of key point that can be taken from our sharing is the first one is we have to establish a strong risk management. So the risk appetite should be improved, not only concerned regarding the reliability, but beyond reliability, which is resilience. I think that is the most important foundation that could enforce all the funding, all the technology come into place. I think that's all from me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. You told us the problem of Indonesia, some 17,000 islands. This must be a real challenge for the country to handle. And Mr. Daniel, you have very nicely given the way you are handling this. I was really impressed by this emergency tower concept. Yes, this is necessary. Certain times you have to restore certain things immediately within a couple of days. This emergency tower thing really will help. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Now I will come to the last speaker of the day, Mr. Vivek Pandey, Senior GM of Grid India. After this, we will have the house open to discussion, can raise questions. You can also say, the people in the audience can also make their cases. So Mr. Vivek Pandey, please, from Grid India.
Thank you, Chairman, sir, and distinguished delegates, speakers on the dais. Thank you for this opportunity for sharing the experience at the National Grid of India. I work at the National Load Dispatch Center and I take care of the system operations. So this is one very important part. NLDC is a designated nodal agency for crisis management. So although we do not own any infrastructure, any assets, physical assets, but we do the important role of coordination between various utilities on the ground, whether it's the generation, transmission, distribution, and on one side, and on the other side we have the administrative setup in terms of Ministry of Power, Central Electricity Authority, and dissemination of information so that recovery happens fast. So India, as you all know, it's a very large country, and we have a very massive infrastructure of 765 kV, 400 kV, 220 kV, and then down below up to the distribution level, and a massive infrastructure across the country. And institutional setup also at the state level, we have the load dispatch centers. At the regional level, we have regional load dispatch center, and NLDC is sort of coordinating the cross-border as well as the regional load dispatch centers, and this is how we take care of the real-time operation and also for crisis management. As we have seen across, our country is certainly susceptible to and vulnerable to various disasters, and technically in operations we call them as low probability, high impact events. Now apart from this, cyclones and floods, whatever we have discussed, we have also seen a massive impact of what we call a disaster. It's also a disaster, the COVID, the pandemic. It impacted very badly. So it impacted basically the availability of human resource, which is the key driver of all the systems and all the infrastructure. So when we talk of disaster resilience, probably we need to bring this also into picture, because that is also very, very crucial. Then the other thing is that if you see our topography, we have on our northern side the Himalayan belt, which is quite prone, which is snow-clad mountains, and of late we have observed that even snow blizzards and snowstorms have also, the occurrence have increased, apart from landslides. So all these events put together, we have had several events wherein the landslides or these events resulted in tower collapses and damage to infrastructure. Then this I need not explain, but what I would like to bring your attention to that, as my previous speaker from Indonesia, he also emphasized that over the years, the frequency of the occurrence has increased. If you see even cyclone, earlier it was maybe one cyclone in a couple of years, but now every year we have 2 or 3 cyclones. The other interesting observation that we have seen, earlier it was mostly concentrated on the eastern coast, but for the last 3 years we are seeing that even the western coast, which was relatively considered to be a calm Arabian Sea, is also now getting events of. So the recent one was the Biparjoy, which occurred on the western coast. Then for all this, as also emphasized, that IMD has now come up, and they have very beautifully, and now their prediction of cyclone track is almost near perfect, and that has been a very, very helpful way. We get advanced warning, maybe a week ahead warning is available, and that is disseminated, communicated all across. There is a National Disaster Management Force which convenes a meeting of all utilities to ensure that there is preparedness all around, and resources are organized. And this emergency restoration system, this also is now, actually over the years that infrastructure has been created, and for 220 kV and 400 kV towers also in India we do have emergency restoration systems, and these are located at very strategic substations
and from there they can be quickly moved in various directions wherever it is required. Then the other thing that we have done is we collaborated with, apart from IMD, to get the radar pictures and all that for real-time tracking of cyclone and the inclement weather. We also collaborated with ISRO, and we shared the GIS lat longs of our power infrastructure, and we got this mapping done with their help. And this on the picture on the right side, it shows the track of the cyclone, and the vulnerable infrastructure could be quickly identified. It helps us in issuing advisory to get the preparedness done, and also in as we move along, because the grid is integrated, the all India grid is integrated, and each system needs to be made fail safe. So even though the infrastructure collapses, care has to be taken that the national grid doesn't, we don't experience a blackout on a very, very large area. So help is available. The moment infrastructure is created, quickly power supply is extended from the neighboring areas to restore the power supply. So Taute also was a very, very interesting experience on the west coast. It was like a train moving from Kerala, then it moves to Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, right up to Rajasthan. So it was a week-long event, and it was a real massive challenge at the national level to coordinate. But this, thanks to the interconnected system and the synchronous system, we were able to tide over this situation very, very successfully. Then the other thing, cloud burst, also these events have occurred, and in October 23, we had loss of this around 2000 megawatt in Teesta river basin, and there were other events also in the Himalayan. You must have heard that because of landslides, the under construction hydro projects was affected, and several laborers were trapped and all those. So these are also events which do affect us, and somehow we need to work out a strategy to effectively tide over the situation. Internationally also we have been collaborating, and what we have seen in the CIGRE, there is a working group 4.47, wherein although we have this in the planning phase concept, what we call as a reliability, and the entire planning that we do is for N-1 criteria, or one step ahead, N-1 criteria that we have been adopting for the planning. But now what is being increasingly accepted, that yes, we need to do something for resilience. One strategy is to strengthen the grid hardening strategies. The other is to come up quickly even when you are hard hit by such low probability events. So that is where this ERS structures and all these help, and flexible resources helps. So then IEEE also has now come up with a definition of resilience, and in 2023 CA, madam, I think she must be aware that the planning criteria also got amended, and this resilience term has now been very emphatically introduced and added into the planning criteria. Then the other report and recommendations that CA has brought out, apart from the CA construction standards, safety standards, for construction of other things, these have to be taken care. This flooding also now, Chennai floods and other places, we have seen that whenever cyclones comes, the low-lying areas, several places gets inundated, and in this particular case, if you see in December 23, very recently, Chennai load, which meets a demand of 3500 megawatt, it came down to almost zero. The infrastructure was not damaged, but the substations got flooded, and they had to be hand-tripped, switched off to avoid electrocution. So that is the other part. Everything is there on ground, but you can't utilize them from safety angle. Then impact of this cloud cover and sudden sandstorms building up. Now, as we are moving towards the 500 gigawatt target that has been set as a part of our energy transition, we are coming up with solar PV on all entire western part, Rajasthan, Gujarat area, and we'll add massive solar PV. Already they are on ground. So whenever this happens, there is a vulnerability of losing the entire power bowl of India. So we have to have reserves, sufficient reserves, that whenever we experience these events happen for a very short duration. For example, this May 23, we lost 8,000 megawatt in just 1 hour. And then the cloud rains happened, the sky was cleared, and again the solar generation comes. So the generation fleet that we have is mainly coal, and we have to make that coal as flexible as possible so that we can tide over such events. Going down, coming up. Then the other resilience part, if you see, because now we would be depending more on solar PV, solar eclipses become a very a celestial event for which we need to plan. And it can be predicted with great precision, but we do need flexible resources to tide over them. Then the other part, high speed, they can damage the solar PV installation. So apart from the transmission, the generation infrastructure also gets damaged, and maybe there needs to be some strengthening or some way out to handle this. This we have seen. Then earthquake is also one event that we have been seeing, and apart from the Richter scale that delivers, that informs us about this intensity of the earthquake, at the grid level we have a monitoring system, what we call as phasor measurement units, which is kind of slightly more advanced than the routine SCADA system. PMUs provide us with high resolution and high speed data for 40 milliseconds. Now we have been over the years since 2012 utilizing PMUs, one for enhanced visualization of the entire grid, and second for it gives a very indirect information, because whenever we have these high winds, what happens, there are particles flowing, and then there are transient faults on the transmission lines. So auto reclosers happen. So these PMUs give a very fine signature of these transient faults. So through these transient faults, we have been able to identify, okay, the track, what was predicted was this, but these are the assets which are getting affected, so that cyclone is moving this way, or the high speed is moving this way. So next, this is the vulnerable transmission line. So then we regulate our HVDC power flows and see that the lines on the AC systems are manageable. So even if it collapses, we do not face a major catastrophe. Similarly, a power station also, if we know that that particular power station is vulnerable, in advance we bring the generation level of that power station to bare minimum, so that even if we lose that power station due to a contingency, the grid is stays intact, and we do not enter into a blackout. So all these experience, one, certainly the lesson is key warning. So the better the accurate warning, the more prepared we are, and the better information dissemination helps us in being well prepared. So that has been quite helpful, and now we are also using the social media platforms also. So whenever such crisis occurs, the list of nodal persons is identified in advance. Very quickly a WhatsApp group is formed, so that all the utilities keep posting information into that WhatsApp group, and everybody is very quickly made aware of what's happening where and what action needs to be taken. Geo mapping has helped. System visibility is certainly a very important thing, and we are working more on it. Then information flow, reinforcement of skilled person. This is also very important. We have been doing it. Whenever we have such cases, the control centers, for a normal duty, we have 4 or 5 persons taking care of various activities. But on contingent days, we reinforce the manpower, because one, crisis response needs more people, more eyes to monitor the system. Then second, the MIS load also increases. There is a lot of people who need information, and they need to be supplied accurate and quick information for response. So that also needs to be taken. So reinforcement at the control center is very important, and that we are doing. Then resilience through synchronous interconnection. So this also
has been helping us. So, this is also what we are recommending, for example, in neighboring countries. So we had incidents when Bangladesh or neighboring countries experienced these cyclones, and we were able to extend help when they needed it, just because we are interconnected. And that's how that policy of neighbor helps neighbor comes, and we came to rescue, and it's vice versa. Backup communication system, I think that was also emphasized, satellite communication and alternate VoIP phones, mobiles. What we have seen, this mobile towers, they also are vulnerable. So we lose communication when we need them the most. So, and even now OPGW, the optical fiber that is being used for communication, they are on the overhead towers. So if we lose that tower, we lose that communication. So having a redundant communication and resilient communication also is a very, very important. A lot of actions have been taken at the central government level also, and we think all these, as we move along, it will certainly help us in being prepared. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek Pandey. You have given a broader outlook, moving away from just cyclone and flood. You have talked of various other weather events which can cause problem to the grid, cloudburst, and the particular type, this cyclone was moving along the coast. Normally it crosses the coast. This cyclone on the west coast was moving along the coast, covering 6-7 states and spreading over days. And these kind of disasters can happen, and we got to be prepared for that. And good that Grid India is taking these aspects into consideration and preparing and ensuing advisory to prepare for handling these issues. Now that we have come to the close of this thing, we will entertain questions, and yes, Mr. Dalji.
I'm Daljit Singh. I work at the Center for Social and Economic Progress, CSEP. And my question is actually, first I'll direct it to Amit, but anyone can answer it. You know what Mr. Pandey pointed out about how actually we are seeing not only the nature, but also the frequency of these extreme events changing. So actually you don't know. There's uncertainty in what you have to plan for. And you know, you were talking about how to make, you know, how we need to have our systems up to the standards, you know, whatever the standards are. But if that itself is changing, that is not the standards, but the event, the severity of that event changes. So for example, in Odisha, you said, you know, if it's gone from class 5 to 6, and that's, you said the speeds were 250, what if it goes up to 300 next time? So you can't design it just for this. How do you determine what level you have to design your system to? Because there's an uncertainty to what the circumstances you're designing for. So how is that taken care of? And you might, you know, how do other countries do it? How have you thought about it? And the other thing I wanted to point out was, again, this is something Mr. Pandey pointed out, that there are other, you know, we've talked mostly about cyclones and flooding, but there's also the things like a dam burst, which is, or even a heat wave, which may be slightly slower, the impacts are slow, but it could be disastrous for the power system, especially if the ambient temperatures really goes well beyond what you've designed for. So do you think we also need to take care of those things when we talk about resilience?
Very tough question, Daljit. Thank you. But yeah, in terms of, yeah, it's a very good question. I think the science around these climatic events is still evolving. I think if you have to answer, if we can tell you that how accurately that we can assess and judge some of these parameters, answer is answer is right now the science is not there. I think we still need to sort of design things. But what we have done, for example, in the case of Odisha, where we were trying to develop some framework and model, what we did, we sort of considered the past events, but we have our own GRI framework, which is a disaster infrastructure resilience index. So basically, we looks at the various events from the future modeling perspective. And we have come up with certain models that this would be the impact in another 20 to 30 years. And if you look at this, most of the assets that are built in infrastructure, especially in the power, have the life of around 20 to 40 years. That's the timeline. And while specifically for the greenfield infrastructure and the brownfield upgradation that you do, you have to consider this timeline and build in this future modeling for a period of around 20 to 40 years. That's all. So I think that's the way I think you need to address this issue, because A, it's difficult to predict, and B, it's very expensive to make everything resilient. So that's my short answer to that. On the second question, of course, yes. All these extreme weather events are important, including the heat wave. So at CDRI, we have started working on the heat wave as well, and looking at the impact of heat wave on various critical infrastructure pieces, including public transport, including community, including power utilities, and so forth. And it has a different sort of lot of big ramification in terms of extreme heat wave, specifically with respect to the peak demand management. It's a big issue. Also with respect to the actual O&M practices and asset management at the utility level. That itself is quite critical. So we are going to work on that, and plus other extreme weather events. We are going to work also on hydropower projects. So we would be working on climate risk data and its importance specifically with the hydropower projects, because we have seen the events that we have seen in last 1 to 2 years that it is very vulnerable. So looking at the various aspects of how to build early warning system in this hydropower system that we have, so that of course we can minimize the impact of these extreme weather events. I remember NHPC along with DRDO have been developing an early warning system which they have been trying to place across the Himalayan belts and across the assets. It's still work in progress. They've started the pilot, and of course that will include multi-hazard. So landslide, cloudburst, GLOF incidents and everything. So and of course we all are trying to learn together on this. I think it's still a complicated subject, specifically with respect to how accurately you can determine these events. And most of the time, the answer is it's probabilistic that you have to do. And that's how even the insurance industry does the modeling, right? And insurance industry who puts money on these things, they have been looking primarily at the probabilistic, because of course actual deterministic, if you have to actually determine, it's very, very tough. So that's an answer.
This is a very important question. I would request Mr. Ravi, Mr. Pandey, and Mr. Senapati also to react to this question. Besides, if anybody else wants to answer, please do so. Mr. Ravi.
I think it's a very important one. There are several ways to look at risk. One way is to look at that asset and say, what can it be forced with, which is a traditional way of looking, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, which you can't predict. At some point, it will give way. The second way is to look at how do I distribute my assets such that I remove one away from the zone. For example, if I have two paths, one along the coast and 160 kilometers away, I may be able to have a second path, which means it's a little more expensive, but at least I don't have an outage. So that is a kind of, when I was in transmission planning, that was the way we did, right? And when you talk of why we plan transmission the way we plan transmission, is partly to take care of the power system flows so that one doesn't impact the other. The second was on OPGW. He talked of hitting it. We in Canada actually have continued to keep microwave, because the microwave is a diversification to the OPG. So when our towers fail due to snowstorms, we actually can have a microwave that keeps it. So within the distribution, and I hope others will comment on it, I see actually just like transmission should be 3 times the generation capacity, typically thumb rules. I think that concept must also come to distribution. Otherwise, the last mile, which is where the consumer is, they continue to face misery, even though our system may be still whole, but the consumer is not able to kept whole. So those are a couple of ideas I had.
Mr. Pandey, would you like to?
Yeah, just a small addition that planning one, I said hardening the infrastructure, that make it more and more stronger and robust to handle higher wind speed, higher all that, strength. That is one part, but then that would be a limit to it because there are costs involved and then various other challenges, design challenges as well. The other important thing that we have seen and it comes is fail-safe strategy. So you know that you can't resist this this high impact event, but we can always plan to be very, very safe even when that thing hits. So it's like going into a bunker or adopting a turtle strategy, just waiting for that storm to pass. So, and then recovery. So that is where in power system we have this black start resources identified in advance, and we carry out these mock drills very periodically. The grid code mandates it that it should be done twice a year, and we coordinate it at the through the load dispatch centers, when in some capable gas stations and hydro stations which can self-start with the help of the local diesel generator, they charge the line and extend. So these are some strategies that we adopt to recover as that storm passes. So that maybe also is an important strategy.
I think design planning wise, it should be optimum. It's not, there is no end to that. It should not add up to the extra cost and contingency, but it should be optimum. And second is operational technology, like redundancy and other things that has to be taken into account. And what Vivek told, the fail-safe conditions. I think that together it has to enforce to manage this resilience and disaster management.
I think everybody has talked on the capacity building and all that, but I think the second aspect is that if the disaster happens, every utility has a disaster outage management plan, which is approved by the regulator. So what happens is, if there is a disaster and the power flow reduces, on the other side, the utility goes into outage management in the area as to which are the areas which should be gone in outage at up to what capacity and all that. So I'm trying to address the second aspect, or the first aspect having been addressed by these.
Yeah, you know, there was a lot of discussion on the utility being prepared for emergency services, and that is a good plan to have. But when it does strike, I think they have talked about help or lack of skilled help. Over the last 15 years, in fact, in North America, we have a tight system amongst all utilities from Mexico to Canada. So whenever floods or anything happens in Florida, it is not uncommon for about 130 bucket trucks to be moving across the border, so that we restore Florida and then they all come back. So that is number one. Number two, we also have an unofficial insurance system for large power transformers on mobile. We have got, you know, on big platforms you can move mobile, and Chintamani spoke about it. So we have about 25 or 30 such, call it investment in storage, but we move it across various utilities so that no one utility is faced with having to keep a $10 million piece of equipment and not using it. So that is a possibility across all the 51 states, or how many of the states in India, to be able to come to that kind of a commonality of saying, okay, let's keep it at these particular points. Second, I would like to add to what Mr. Pandey said. In power systems, we know where we can let it fail. Wherever the nodal voltage is the lowest, that's where the system will separate. So in a way, what we do in disaster management is move the power flows in a particular way to a place where we know we can deal with it when it fails. So that is a part of the dynamics of power system operations. Now we have brought it into distribution as well. We can do that fairly better in distribution, so that the SCADA system now, the DMS, ADMS, we can almost predict where we will take the finite element and then break it at that point, because we have got a lot of resources around that point. So there are some of these strategies also we've adopted.
And just one more point, as I said, the very important point is also for utilities, for regulators, for everyone to include resilience risk assessment. I think that's resilience risk assessment. That's very important because that will inform the actions that all of us have just spoken about. Where to intervene, how to intervene, what needs to be done. I think, and that should be something which has to be done regularly. Because of course, the things that we are talking about, that's, as you said, that it changes rapidly. So that's very important because of course, we are pretty sure that utilities, the technology provider, all will come with a solution. But for that, you need to be aware of what risk that as a utility that you're facing. And that's very important. Yeah, thanks.
So I had just one point to add to what Mr. Pandey was adding in terms of a total chaos in a control room when such a kind of event happens. And one is of course providing backup in terms of manpower. But technology in terms of actually what he was saying in terms of isolating the systems, in terms of switch order management we call. There is something called as auto switch order management which actually opens the system so as to save the system at one place, or islanding what we call, or black start what he was mentioning. So that kind of thing. Now Mumbai has one of the best islanding systems in the country or maybe world also. So these things as we spread across the country need to be developed. That is one. So technology will be a greatest enabler in all these things is what is my belief.
Can I add? Okay. Firstly, I would like to take it back from the fundamental about the risk management. So because the resilience cope with less frequency, so less likely to be happen, but the impact is catastrophic. So we have a limited sample of data, and that becomes a challenge in risk quantification. But nowadays, there are more and more methods in risk quantification, like Monte Carlo or whatsoever, that can be improved. That's the first one. And then in PLN, we are establishing single source of truth. We've heard that there might be systems and application and all information media, but without single source of truth, well, the resource cannot be planned optimizedly. And then the third one is, if we could only do just like the analogy in IT for cybersecurity, making a stress test to quantify how much is enough, how much is sufficient. We've done it for the meter. We have this chamber to whether the meter withstand all the heat and the humidity. Well, maybe it withstand 1 hour, it could represent a year, or if it withstand 2 hours, it represents 2 years. So if we could only do a stress test to all the assets anticipating the severe climate, that would be one answer. Thank you.
Any other? Yes. Please introduce yourself. Introduce yourself and.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Tushar. I am from Tata Power Central Odisha. My question is Mr. Vivek Pandey, basically. As you have told me that SCADA is specially designed for a steady state response, not for transient response. And that's why Power Grid has installed PMU in different strategic locations across the country. So from there you are getting data to your control center, right? Centralized control center. On that basis, do you have any, measure to take care any control action? I mean, if there is any anomaly in the network, that system can detect and take corrective action so that it does not happen, right? One thing. Another is, if it is there, can you take care of this blackout situation, which happened many times in India?
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, as of now, PMUs are basically being used for visualization only. And there is no control action that is being taken, automatic control action. So controls are still through after operator takes a decision. Operator sees there is some stress in the system, and that is obvious through over the years we have developed that kind of intelligence and in our operators, that they see that, okay, angular separation across this corridor, this is how it is varying. We had that 2006 event in US blackout, wherein the angular separation increased. So these past experiences have taught us that we need to develop a baselining of angular separation, and that we have been doing and done. So the operator knows that if it goes beyond this, there is some action that needs to be taken. And those actions are very, very fundamental. If there is a transmission line out between those two sections, try to bring in additional transmission line, reduce the impedance, improve the voltage, regulate the load. So those actions are fundamental, and the operator instructs the local utility or the generating company, they take those actions. So the actions are still driven by the manual decision of the operator, because designing a automated control system for such wide area systems is really very, very challenging, because you can't really envisage in advance that this is how the system combination will occur in real time. So those permutation combinations are really impossible to work out in advance. That is one. The second part is about you're talking, can we predict a blackout? See, blackout, sometimes it could happen due to a sudden instant high impact event. But a lot of cases, blackout, what we have seen happens, it builds up. And it's only an experienced operator who can connect the dots and see something is not in the right direction. So that kind of intuition comes, and then he tries to contact, he tries to consult his fellow operators, and that is how many a times we have been able to avert blackouts. Of course, those cases don't come up and they are not discussed, because it's very difficult to say that if you had not taken this action, the blackout would have happened or not. So it's very difficult to say. Although in airlines we have this definition of near miss events. So in fact we borrowed that concept from there, and now in the grid code we have introduced this definition of near miss events. And let's see, this is the first year we will have to report these near misses so maybe we'll over the years we'll build up that kind of intelligence. The third important thing when you talk about SCADA, the control center confusion, and the people get overwhelmed by the information overload, because we have this sequence of events coming in live. We have these event loggers flowing in that information. So when we have this kind of massive event, the number of alarms, the number of SOE events, they are manifold, and many of these could be false alarms, many of these, so intelligent alarm processing, that also is a field in itself that is coming up. People are trying to develop some algorithms to give right kind of information to the operator, so that he doesn't get bowled over by the information overload. So this aspect is also very important in disaster response. Thank you.
Actually, when we were discussing this panel, today we have outlined various facets of managing disasters. It doesn't come necessarily just from the asset itself, but in the way you take control action, the way you take preventive control action. And so I think if you look at this space, the NMS, for example, in the systems that I have worked on, it is a master system that constantly looks at what should be my N-1, N-2, everywhere. Across the whole network, it keeps looking. So it is not like a SCADA system necessarily just waiting for just a human interaction. The other sense I get is the frequency. The moment I see small variations in frequency, I know I've got a problem. So we have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 of ramping down and taking what's called load rejection. So the computer is always calculating, give me 50 megawatt cuts, give me 100 megawatt cuts, where all that the computers do these days. The same concept is actually coming now to the DMS and ADMS. Now in the NMS we do, I'm not trying to get very technical, but it's much easier to do state estimation in NMS because all JX. You try doing that in the DMS, you got R component, so your vector analysis is very, very computive intensive. But we are doing it now. So the question is, in this across the spectrum, there is policy, there is regulatory, there is asset, there is control action, there is T action, there is a D action, and all that then together makes a package of disaster mitigation and resilience, as opposed to saying, let's make every substation hardy for the next 1,000 years. I think that may not necessarily where the answer lies. So I think hopefully Mr. Pandey and Mr. Chitnis must have answered as to why our control action is equally important as the asset is. It's mastery actually. What the control operator does is a mastery in what they do, in fact, to save our systems.
Any other question to the No, there is no other.
Can wrap up.
So yes, I think.
Yeah, I think I have to thank all the panelists. I mean, the wish of what we wanted to present as a multitude of actions and strategies, I think has come to the fore. I have two tasks, and one maybe Mr. Amit Tripathi has got homework out here. And if Reji is here, Reji's staff have got a second homework also. If you take all our presentations and you map it into one document, you will see areas of support and you'll see areas of lacunas, right? And then the trick is to work on the lacunas so that we are able to stitch it. For example, earthquake is, Mr. Pandey brought out earthquake. It's not very well at the moment covered, right? A landslide was something he brought out. Heat, slow moving heat has been pictured here. So if you were to map all our presentations here into one document and see where the lacunas are, it'll be good. I think it'll be a worthwhile exercise in your planning also to be able to say this is what India needs as opposed to what others may be doing or not doing. So Mr. Chair, I have.
So we have had a wonderful discussion. In fact, we have a real distinguished panel on this side of the table, and everybody has brought in their experience into this discussion. Such an important topic, and everybody has brought in their experience and expertise into this matter, starting from the grid design, practical issues in the field, the control systems and other things. So everything is there in this discussion. We have had a very good this thing, and I thank all the panelists for giving their valuable time and their inputs into this discussion. Yes, ISGF has really to work on to consolidate. I hope somebody is recording all the these things so that some good document comes out of it, and it throws up issues that needs to be taken further. And he has rightly pointed out certain areas he has pointed out, there could be more in that also, and it will make a real good document. In fact, we have had a couple of other occasions also this has been discussed, and this will be another document which can lead to further. This is a field that is developing, and as he said, we go by what has happened in the past. Our forecasting this thing, still we may not be able to forecast always, but we have been going by what has been happening in the past, not only here, elsewhere in the world also. We learn from their experiences also, and the situation will improve, and our preparedness will improve over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, UN Behera sir, for your invaluable contribution to this important session, and thank you all the panelists for your invaluable contribution to this important session. Now I would like to request Mr. Vivek Pandey to kindly get the memento from our chair. Please. I request to Mr. Daniel to come and get the memento. I would like to Mr. Senapati to kindly get the memento. I would like to Mr. Chintamani to kindly get the memento, please. I would like to Miss Vandana Singhal to kindly get the memento. I would like to Mr. Mehta to kindly get the memento, please. I would like to Mr. Amit to kindly get the memento. I would like to Mr. Ravi to kindly get the memento. I would like to Mr. Ravi to kindly give the memento to our chair. I would like to get a group photograph, so please come forward.